Good morning, everybody. It is time for the Merkle Retirement Minute, trying to get you set up for those times where you come back and just sit back and enjoy the retirement years. But there's something really special we need to talk about. Ladies that are out there right now, this is really important for you, Michelle.
It is. Abby Hunt-Rods is joining us from Merkle Retirement Planning. Thank you for joining us here this morning. Always great information. And let's talk about why we're kind of just really zeroing in and focusing on the women in retirement today.
Yeah. Women face a unique set of circumstances, challenges for a number of reasons. Generally speaking, we make less money over our working years, and I think that's something that's getting better, but it is an obstacle to overcome because if you make less money, you have less money to save. Mm-hmm. On top of that, we're more likely to stay at home with kids when they're younger, or later on to stay at home or take time off and care for our aging parents. Mm-hmm. Or work part-time. So, if you're raising kids and you have a family, you need some flexibility typically in one spouse's schedule in order to juggle everything, and that tends to fall on the shoulders of women. So if we make less, we work fewer number of years, that has a pretty substantial impact on our Social Security benefits, because the way that they're calculated is off of your top 35 wage earning years.
Okay, I didn't realize those are top 35. Okay.
Yeah, so if you have some zeros in there because you took some years off, that can have a pretty meaningful impact.
Wow.
So knowing how that's calculated is important, because maybe then it makes sense to work a couple years longer and offset some of those zeros that you experienced earlier on. So that's one piece of it. We generally live longer, so we can anticipate longer life expectancy.
That's a big one, isn't it?
It is. On average, 2 years longer. My grandma's been a widow for 14 years. So planning to, sustain your own income needs, individually, that's a huge risk and something that needs to be accounted for now, because we don't know what that's going to play out like down the road. And then typically women tend to be a little bit more conservative from an investment risk standpoint. So if we live longer, then maybe we need to build out our investments in a way that accounts for that longevity risk, the inflation risk, by taking a little bit more investment risk in pieces of your portfolio. So it really all kind of works together, and planning for some of those obstacles that you need to account for is going to be the best way.
So how long should a lady plan on for retirement? What's the target age then?
Right now, the current average life expectancy for a woman is 89.
89,
really? It keeps getting higher and higher, doesn't it?
Yes.
So what's this strategy then? Are you planning for 90, or are you planning for 100, or what are you planning for then?
We plan for 100.
You do.
In our family's retirement plans, just because again, you don't know. And if you run out of money and you're 88, well then now that's not a good place to be. You can't go back to work at that point. So. Right. We would rather be aggressive in planning to 100 than have any sort of shortfall, late in life.
Talk about the differences in planning, because not all women are part of a partnership. Some, like you talked about individually versus, so kind of talk about those considerations and how that works as well.
Yeah, and that goes back to, making smart decisions with any of the resources, the benefits that you have available to you. If you were ever married for more than 10 years, then you might have some additional Social Security strategies available to you, which could be really powerful. And a lot of times women don't know about that. They think, oh, well, I'm divorced now, or my first husband's passed away now, so that's off the table. Not necessarily. And so knowing those options, knowing, what you could potentially access is going to be very meaningful to your retirement plan as a single, whether you're single, widowed, or divorced.
And that makes you really touched on that in regards to the importance of having somebody that helps you with this planning, because there are things that a lot of us aren't probably aware of, like you just mentioned with that point.
Yeah, retirement planning is so much more complex than it used to be, and it's changing all the time. I mean, that's the hard part. We see legislation pass pretty often that has a direct impact on your retirement planning options. The Secure Act that just passed is one of them. Social Security legislation is changing all the time. And so those changes will ultimately impact the options that you have.
Yeah, I'm sure that long-term care for someone too has to come into play too. And obviously the sooner that you start preparing for this, the better. But what's the strategy used for long-term care for people?
Well, especially women.
Yeah.
So 80% of men pass away married, and 80% of women pass away single. So if
Wow.
you really think about that, obviously, you know, when they're married, then the wife can typically take care of the husband for at least a period of time if there's any sort of additional care needed. But then once she's outlived her husband, now there's no one there to take care of her. So having a long-term care in place for both, but even more so for women, is going to be very important. And that's something that has changed a lot in the last, 10 years or so.
Right.
The long-term care planning, and I think it will continue to change. But just identifying what strategy might make the most sense for you, given your different resources, maybe your different longevity expectations. A lot of times we hear people say, well, my parents paid for long-term care insurance for 20 years and never even ended up using it. Well, that's not a great place to be either. So kind of knowing what some of those hybrid strategies look like, and then, knowledge is power. So then deciding, okay, I understand the pros and cons to this, and I'm choosing to implement this as my hybrid strategy. So
is it ever too late for a lady to say, we need to sit down, we need to start planning this?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
No, I would say it's never too late for anyone. Again, the hardest part with retirement planning is just getting started. It's kind of getting that momentum to get the ball rolling. And then once you see some of these strategies, or you identify how you can improve your situation, then it's motivating, then you get excited about it, and you can really start to envision how this looks not only now, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and that's pretty cool. So,
and you can make a world of difference in a 5 or 10 year period, couldn't you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's never too soon to get started though either. Like kind of the flip side of that in regards to, because I think sometimes people, I have to get to this certain point before I can kind of engage and start this process. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, if you get started sooner, you have the benefit of time. Compound interest is a very powerful thing, one of the most powerful things when it comes to saving for the future. So saving as much as you can today, automating it as much as you can.
Yeah, that's one of the keys, isn't it? Is automating it so you don't physically have to go in and do it yourself.
Yes, because there's always something else to spend your money on.
Right.
Whether it's raising kids, a mortgage, there's always more pressing financial, goals, things today versus, well, I don't need this $500 this month, so I'm going to save it for the future. Well, most of us could probably spend that $500 another way today if we don't prioritize the retirement planning. So yes, automate it, and then you don't have to think about it, out of sight, out of mind. It's just happening, for you.
Yeah, and you can help them sit down and see what the long-term, a goal is, and what the long-term payoff is, and that could be motivational as well.
Exactly. Right. Seeing how that benefits you 20 years from now, then people get excited about it. Then it's like, oh, I can, we can travel the world, or we can do all these things that we've been dreaming about doing, but it requires sacrifice today.
Now, there's a lot of things to learn here, Michelle.
Right, and knowledge is power, as you had mentioned. So you have a great opportunity for women to come and learn from other women on some of these strategies. Talk about your upcoming workshop.
Yeah, we have classes for women. It's called Women in Retirement, and the next one is February 20th.
Okay.
So not necessarily, only restricted to women attendees. We have had some brave men attend in the past, but we're going to talk specifically about strategies that are geared towards widows, divorced, single ladies, and then married women, because again, I think a lot of times one spouse takes the lead with the financial pieces of your future, and it's good to be involved in that and know, what if something happens to the person who is kind of the lead in that situation. You need to know what implications that has to you then if you have to take it over.
So that one's going to highlight some of the benefits of ladies and women in planning their retirement. But you have classes all the time that go just for everyone else to attend, for everyone to attend. And it's really getting a lot of attention from a lot of different people saying, we need to sit down and make this happen. How can they find out more information about when all the other classes are going on?
If you go to merkelclass.com, that will list out all the different classes that we have coming up, and you should be able to identify which one might make the most sense for you.
There it is. And again, just take the first step. That's what it needs, Michelle. Take the first step.
First step with the experts.
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming in. Again, you can make a world of difference, but it starts with meeting with Merkel.
Absolutely.
Thanks
for having me.
Having a plan.
All right.